Here's a brief video tutorial on what you can expect to see maybe on your FRQ. This is the aggregate supply, aggregate demand model, and this is what happens when you have a demand shock and you just allow it to self-correct. So if you have a positive demand shock, aggregate demand would move to the right in the short run. Prices would rise, producers would produce more goods and services, so we would move to this equilibrium right here. Then over time, wages would catch up. So in the long run, wages begin to rise, and as a result, businesses reduce output until you reach the new long-run equilibrium at a higher rate, higher price level. If you have a negative aggregate demand shock, then aggregate demand would move to the left, prices would fall, businesses would reduce output. As a result of a reduced output and people getting laid off, eventually, in the long run, wages would decrease. And as wages decrease, businesses would put people back on the payroll, increase production, and so the aggregate supply curve would shift to the right until you arrive at your new long-run equilibrium. Okay, this next scenario is what's going to happen if you use fiscal policy to correct a demand shock. So if you get a positive demand shock, aggregate demand shifts to the right, which would cause the price level to rise. This gap right here would be an inflationary gap. So to reduce that inflation, you would follow contractionary policy, which would mean you would either need to raise taxes or reduce government spending until the aggregate demand curve reduces its level to the previous long-run equilibrium and wipes out your inflation. If on the other hand you have a negative demand shock, then aggregate demand would shift to the left, the price level would drop. However, you would have a decrease in output, which would cause a decrease in employment and an increase in unemployment, and that gap is a recessionary gap. And the way you fix a recession is you use expansionary fiscal policy, which would require you to either lower taxes or increase spending or some combination of those two. That's it in a nutshell. That's all fiscal policy is. It is a response to an aggregate demand shock. You do not use fiscal policy if there is a aggregate supply shock, and that's a topic for another lesson. When you cut the taxes or increase government spending, aggregate demand will move back to where it was initially in the long run, eliminating a recession. In a perfect world where everything else works just like it should, ceteris paribus, that would be your result.